Earl Briggs didn't answer his radio for 3 days. 3 days of static. 3 days of me sitting at that table with the handset in my fist, trying every frequency I could find, getting nothing but white noise and the occasional ghost of a distant voice that was never his. I told myself he'd gone into town, that the weather had knocked out his antenna, that there were 100 reasonable explanations for why the only other human being within 20 miles of me had gone completely silent. I told myself that. But I kept the rifle within arm's reach. On the 4th day, his voice came through. Clear. Calm. Too calm for a man who'd said what he said before the signal died. I almost dropped the handset. Earl, what happened? You've been dark for 3 days.
I know,
he said.
I had to think about what to tell you.
I asked him what that meant. He was quiet for a moment, long enough that I thought I'd lost him again. Then he said,
Have you seen its face yet?
I told him no. Just the silhouette. Just the shape of it at the tree line in the dark and snow. He exhaled, slow and deliberate, like a man choosing his next words, the way you choose your footing on rotten ice.
Good,
he said.
That means it's still deciding.
I asked him what it was deciding.
Whether you're worth the trouble,
he said.
It watches first, always. It doesn't move until it knows you, until it understands how you move, how you react, how you think.
He paused.
It's been watching me for 11 years, Marcus. 11 years, and I'm still here because I learned one rule.
I asked him what the rule was.
When you see its face, don't look away first.
He wouldn't tell me more than that. Said some things you had to experience to understand. That explaining them wrong was worse than not explaining them at all. He told me to stay inside after dark. Told me to keep the fire going all night, every night. Told me that it seemed to dislike light. Not that it stopped it, but that it preferred the dark the way most predators do. Then he told me something that I've thought about almost every hour since. He said,
It's not hunting you, Marcus. Not yet. Right now, it's just curious.
The radio clicked off. I sat there in the silence of the cabin and tried to figure out which was worse, being hunted or being studied. I didn't see it that night, or the night after. 4 days passed in a strange, suspended quiet. I began to wonder if I'd imagined everything. The figure at the tree line, the footsteps on the roof, the shallow impressions with no trail, sleep deprivation, grief, isolation. The mind manufactures monsters. When it has nothing else to do, I started chopping extra wood just to have something physical to focus on. I was out back splitting birch on the 7th day when I felt it. Not a sound, not a movement, just the absolute certainty, the kind that lives below thought, that something was watching me. I set the axe down slowly, turned around. It was standing at the tree line in full daylight, not hiding, not partially obscured by shadow or snowfall or distance, standing in the open between 2 large spruce trees, 35 feet away, in the flat, gray light of an Alaskan winter afternoon, looking at me. I had never seen it clearly before. Part of me had hoped that seeing it in daylight would make it less frightening. That clarity would dissolve the terror the way it dissolves most things. It did not. It was tall, 6.5 feet at least, maybe more. But the proportions were wrong in a way that made height almost irrelevant. The limbs were too long. The arms hung past the knees. The legs had an extra joint, something bent the wrong direction just below the hip, that gave its stillness a coiled, loaded quality, like a spring under pressure. The skin was pale, not the pale of a person who avoids the sun, the pale of something that has never been warm, a gray-white, almost translucent, stretched tight over a frame that was too angular everywhere. And the face. God. The face. I want to describe it accurately because I've never been able to stop seeing it, and I need you to understand why. The features were almost human. Almost. The way a reflection in moving water is almost a face. The eyes were the worst part. Large, far too large, and without any visible iris or pupil. Just a flat, pale, reflective surface. Like the eye of a deep-sea fish. Like something that evolved to see in total darkness and never needed to develop anything else. It had a mouth. Slightly open. I could see, or I thought I could see, rows of teeth, too numerous and too thin, like needles set close together. It didn't breathe. In that cold air, in that temperature, I could see my own breath billowing in clouds. The Rake stood 35 feet away in the Alaskan winter and produced no breath at all. I don't know how long we stood there. Time did something strange. The rational part of my brain, the part that had spent a career measuring load-bearing structures, calculating tolerances, making logical assessments, went completely offline. What was left was something older, something that remembered what it meant to be prey. I thought about Earl's words. Don't look away first. So I didn't. I held its gaze, those flat, pale, lightless eyes, and I did not blink, did not move, did not breathe more than I absolutely had to. And it watched me back. Then something shifted, a micro-expression, if you can call it that on a face like that. Something in the set of its jaw, the angle of its head tilting a fraction of a degree. It looked, and I know how this sounds, almost interested. Not aggressive, not threatening. Interested. The way you'd look at something you hadn't expected to find out here. Something that surprised you. Then it moved. Not toward me, not away. It simply turned, unhurried, fluid, completely silent, and stepped back into the trees. 3 steps. 4. And it was gone. Absorbed into the dark between the spruces, as if the forest had opened and swallowed it whole. I stood there in the snow until my hands stopped shaking. I got back on the radio to Earl that evening, told him what I'd seen. All of it. The daylight sighting, the description, the staring contest I'd apparently just had with something that should not exist. He was quiet for a very long time.
You held its gaze,
he said finally. Yes. Another long pause.
And it left.
Yes. He made a sound I couldn't quite read, something between relief and something else.
That's the first time I've heard of that. Most people look away. Instinct. You can't help it. And when you look away...
He stopped. When you look away, what? I asked.
It takes that as permission,
he said quietly.
To move closer.
That night I couldn't sleep again. Not from terror this time. from something more complex than terror, because here's what I kept coming back to. It had looked at me with something that resembled curiosity, and for one insane, inexplicable moment, standing in the snow, holding its gaze, I had felt something that resembled it back. I wanted to understand what it was. I know that sounds like the beginning of every terrible decision a person can make. I know that. But I've spent my entire adult life solving problems by understanding them, by looking at a structure, identifying its logic, finding where the load was going, and whatever the rake was, it had a logic. I could feel it. Rules it operated by. A reason it watched before it moved. I just didn't know the rules yet. I started keeping notes that night. Everything I'd observed. The track pattern. The bipedal stride. The way it appeared in silence and disappeared the same way. The fact that it had been to the roof, inside the boundary of the cabin, but had not entered. The unlocked door it had not walked through. The fact that it produced no visible breath in sub-zero temperatures. The fact that it had looked at me across 35 feet of open ground in daylight and chosen to leave rather than act. I wrote for 3 hours, filled 12 pages of the only notepad I had, a yellow legal pad I'd brought to make grocery lists. When I finally put the pen down, I read it all back. And one thing kept jumping out at me. Every single encounter had happened closer than the last. I mapped it out. First sighting at the tree line, 40 feet minimum. Second sighting, daylight, 35 feet. The roof, directly above me. 0 feet of horizontal distance. The door, the handle had been touched. 0 feet. I stared at that progression for a long time. It wasn't random. It wasn't opportunistic. It was methodical, measured, like a series of tests, each one pushing the boundary a little further, watching how I responded, adjusting. Earl had said it was curious. But looking at those numbers, I thought of a different word. Patient. I fell asleep in the chair sometime after 3 a.m., dreamless, deep. The sleep of a body that simply gave out. I woke to pale morning light coming under the door, and the immediate, disorienting awareness that something was wrong. The fire was out. That wasn't unusual. I sometimes let it burn low overnight. But the cold was wrong. Too deep, too immediate. The kind of cold that only happens when... I looked at the door. It was open, not wide, not dramatically, just ajar. Maybe 4 inches. A thin blade of white winter light and freezing air cutting across the floor toward me. I had bolted it before I sat down. I was certain. I stood up slowly, walked to the door, pushed it open and looked outside. Fresh snow on the porch, undisturbed, except for one thing. On the porch, in the snow, directly in front of the door, something had been left. I crouched down and looked at it for a long time before I touched it. It was a bone, long, thin, pale as the creature itself, stripped completely clean the way only something that uses its mouth with precision can strip a bone. I didn't recognize the animal it came from. The proportions were wrong. The size was wrong. And there was something carved into the surface of it. Shallow scratches, deliberate, running in parallel lines that were just systematic enough to not be random. I stood up, looked out at the tree line. Nothing. Empty snow. Silence. I looked back down at the bone in my hand. And the thought that came to me, the thought I could not push away no matter how hard I tried, was that this wasn't a threat. It was a gift.